Disney CEO Bob Iger is in a full-on panic, and there's a lot of reasons for that. The company is losing a lot of money. Stock prices are down, attendance is down on their parks. New attractions that they've created within the last few years are absolutely bombing left and right, and they actually have some classic attractions that have been modified, set to roll out over the next 18 months or so. Those likely will all bomb as well because they're following the new Disney strategy, where they've decided to say, screw the family brand, the thing that's actually brought us where we are and made us all this money. We are full on a social commentary brand. We're here to change the world. And in that, they have absolutely screwed up Star Wars. They've absolutely screwed up Marvel. They've absolutely screwed up Pixar. And basically how everyone sees Disney today is just a far cry from the way people saw them just 5 years ago. And the more Bob Iger talks about the problems with Disney and how he wants to fix them, the more you can see Disney cannot be fixed as long as Bob Iger is still in charge. He actually performed a coup of his own guy, Bob Chapek, his hand-selected guy that he put in place that pushed forward his vision of what Disney was supposed to be. It wasn't working out. He decided he was going to come in and be the white knight, the guy on the horse to save everybody. It's not working out. Recently, he talked to Morgan Stanley Technology, Media, and Telecom Conference, and he was asked about the health of Disney's big franchises. On Marvel, Bob Iger said, there are 7,000 characters. There are a lot more stories to tell. What we have to look at Marvel is not necessarily the volume of Marvel stories we're telling, but how many times we go back that well on certain characters. Sequels typically do well for us. Do you need a third and a fourth, for instance, or is it time to turn to other characters? This dude has no idea what the real problem with the MCU right now. And I understand why he's saying, do we need to visit these characters a third and fourth time? They just went and did Ant-Man 3 with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. That thing is in the middle of bombing. It's actually probably going to make less than the very first movie that was released 8 years prior. We just had Thor: Love and Thunder. That abomination absolutely bombed at the box office as well. Is that because people don't want to see Thor movies anymore? Is that because people all of a sudden really just don't like Ant-Man? No, it's because they've went out and hired the worst people imaginable to go out there and write and direct a lot of these movies. Now, they did bring back the original director of the Ant-Man movie for the third film, Peyton something. I can't remember the guy's last name, but you can tell it was ham-fisted in there. He had to throw so much crap on top of Ant-Man and the Wasp, i.e. Kang, MODOK, and a bunch of other crap, that ends up bloating out the film, and he can't even tell the story that he wants to tell with the character. Then in the case of Thor: Love and Thunder, they brought in Taika Waititi, and Ragnarok was successful. The third Thor film was successful in spite of bringing someone like Taika Waititi on board to direct the movie. Now, he didn't write it, which is probably why it was pretty much bearable, but in my opinion, pretty bad, because there was so much Taika Waititi in it. It became a running joke. It was just a bunch of gags, but it was able to actually tell a competent story. We get to Thor: Love and Thunder, Taika Waititi all of a sudden has no more strings attached. He's working completely without oversight, gets to write the entire script and direct the movie, and what do we get? A trash abomination Taika Waititi film instead of an actual Thor movie. And Gore the God Butcher was the newest Thor story within comic books that actually could make a good movie, and they blew their chances with that. But there are a lot of other stories to mine with characters like Ant-Man and Thor. They never really even touched the Walt Simonson Thor run in Marvel Comics, i.e. the greatest Thor run in the history of Marvel Comics. We still haven't seen Beta Ray Bill. I don't think throwing these mainstay characters away and no longer featuring them in movies is the answer. The answer is to go back to the original equation, where you went out and you found the most innovative writers, the best producers, the best directors, teamed them with your best superheroes while taking the stories that define them throughout the decades and putting it on the big screen, and it worked pretty much every single time. There were only a few times where people weren't at least satisfied with the film. Iron Man 2, Thor: The Dark World are the kind of the ones that come to mind, although I didn't like Age of Ultron very much either. But for the most part, once they took those best stories with the best characters and put them with competent creators, it worked every single time. There's no competent creators anymore. Kevin Feige can't do this by himself. He actually needs good people to work with, but they've gone out of their way to hire as many green writers, directors, and producers as possible to diversify the credit scenes at the very end of the movies that they've forgotten what made the MCU special to begin with. Bob Iger wasn't done. He also said, there's nothing in any way inherently off in terms of the Marvel brand. I think we just have to look at what characters and stories we are mining. And if you look at the trajectory of Marvel over the next 5 years, you'll see a lot of newness. Now we're going to turn back to the Avengers franchise, but with a whole set of different Avengers as an example. Dude, there is something wrong with the Marvel brand. It used to be bulletproof. It was just on an upward trajectory. When we got to Avengers, you're like, wow, it can't get any bigger. And then next thing you know, you hit Captain America Civil War, then you hit Black Panther, and then you hit Infinity War, and then you're like, oh my God, how big can Endgame really be? And it actually tops all of them. There's something very, very off with the Marvel brand, and I think all the newness is the problem, because they've decided to go to the Marvel Now era, the all-new, all-different era of Marvel Comics, where you have all these replacement characters to the mainline heroes, because that's what Marvel Comics wanted to do. They needed to diversify the line by removing the characters that were successful within their comic book stories. And it failed every single time. There's only a couple of examples of where those characters even almost caught on. Miles Morales being one of them, but he wasn't originally in the 616. He was in the Ultimate Universe. Maybe Robbie Reyes is somewhat successful, but he was never really popular. There are so many problems with these characters because they're hollow figures. There's nothing interesting about them. And then once you start replacing the mainline heroes with basically just duplicates, what's special about them? There's nothing special. We're just going to see second, third-rate Iron Man, third-rate Captain America, third-rate Hulk. Like, who wants to see a Golgurt Hulk movie? That's what we're going to get to see. We're going to see Amadeus Cho in Planet Hulk, but nobody wants to see Amadeus Cho in Planet Hulk. We were promised we were going to get that movie, right? They said, well, we can't make a standalone Bruce Banner Hulk movie, but we're going to incorporate elements of Planet Hulk into the MCU movies, so you'll get it over like 3 acts and 3 movies. They showed it to us once. That thing is absolutely a gold mine waiting to be explored. Now, it would be a very expensive movie to make, no doubt, but nobody wants to see that great story with Amadeus Cho. And with all this newness and all these new characters that they're bringing in, which are just replacements and duplicates, there are no classic stories to mine. That's a big part of the equation that Bob Iger and Kevin Feige seemingly have forgotten. There are plenty of stories left to tell with Iron Man, with Captain America, with Thor, with Doctor Strange, and all these mainstay characters that are really, really popular. You can't just throw them by the wayside and hope that these new characters are going to get over, because we've seen it before. It never, ever works. Bob Iger is fixing the wrong problems. They have a problem with too many characters at this point. Try and watch Black Panther Wakanda Forever. There are too many characters that they're trying to elevate in one film. The only character that never gets elevated is Black Panther himself. It makes no sense. They're shoving all these things in there so they can introduce them in their own solo titles later, and it's never going to work. And it's absolutely insane that they keep going down the same path. We also talk about Star Wars, another dead franchise. Star Wars, we made 3 what we called saga films, which is obviously the successor to George Lucas's first 6. They did very well at the box office. Tremendously well, as a matter of fact. We've made 2 so-called standalones in Rogue One and Solo. Rogue One did quite well. Solo was a little disappointing. It gave us pause just to think about the cadence was a little too aggressive, and so we decided to pull back a bit. We are still developing Star Wars films. We're going to make sure that when we make one, that it's the right one. So we're being very careful there. Careful? You haven't made a Star Wars movie in years upon years now, and none are actually in development. You're not filming any Star Wars movies because you destroyed the brand. You want to talk about the box office? Trust me, The Rise of Skywalker was supposed to make as much money as Endgame. Believe you me, that's what Disney was expecting, and it didn't come anywhere close, because once people got to The Last Jedi and they realized what Kathleen Kennedy and Disney's vision of Star Wars was moving forward, they checked out. Yes, some people are still going to the theater sometimes to check in and see what's happening with Star Wars, but it's a dead brand at this point. And talking about, well, Solo was a little disappointing. It's the first Star Wars movie ever that didn't make money. Even the Clone Wars animated movie that absolutely sucked made money. That's how bad Solo, a Star Wars movie, is. Rogue One, I think they were still riding high off of the expectations that they were going to be doing something great, because people hadn't been completely turned off because The Last Jedi hadn't come out yet. And yes, they've had a couple of successes here and there, most notably The Mandalorian, but they pretty much ruined that when they did their Book of Boba Fett show, which I don't know how you ruin a Boba Fett TV show, but somehow Kathleen Kennedy and Disney Star Wars managed to do that. You brought Ewan McGregor back as Obi-Wan Kenobi, the best part of the prequel trilogy. This is something Star Wars fans have been wanting for over a decade at this point, and somehow you dropped the fucking ball. How do you make the show not about Obi-Wan Kenobi? It's absolutely insane how they've gotten here. They had one real standout character that felt like he was going to have some staying power, right? Baby Yoda? Turns out he's just an adorable plush toy that's out of fashion nowadays because they absolutely destroyed that character too. The state of Star Wars is somehow worse than the state of the MCU. And with Bob Iger in charge, and the more he talks about this stuff, you can see he can't fix any of it because he's completely oblivious to all the issues that have happened under his watch and the watch of the man he hand chose to succeed him at Disney. It's absolutely insane what's going on here. Not too long ago, I actually talked about how Marvel Studios were catching up to Marvel Comics and why that was going to be an enormous issue. It's looking like I was more and more prophetic by the day. Every time they release one of these projects, it looks like I was dead on. If you haven't seen this video, definitely check it out right here.